Every day and around the world, airliners suffer emergencies, but these emergencies rarely make the news because the professionally trained air crews handle these emergencies, usually without incident. But a couple of high-profile incidents recently have shown how an air crew and or ATC air traffic control can take a perfectly good aircraft and put it in an undesirable state, and coming very close to causing a huge aviation disaster. These incidents now have not only the attention of the media, but the NTSB and the FAA, and the head of the FAA, Billy Nolan, is now calling for an FAA safety call to action. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. Let's check it out. In Billy Nolan's memo on yesterday, 14 February, says the initial focus here on paragraph 3 will be to hold a safety summit in March to examine what additional actions the aviation community needs to take to maintain our current safety record. The group of commercial and general aviation leaders, labor partners, and others will examine which mitigations are working and why others appear to be not as effective as they once were. Second, I'm asking the commercial aviation safety team to take a fresh look at aviation safety information analysis and sharing data. We need to mine the data to see whether there are incidents that resemble ones we have seen in recent weeks. And we need to see if there are indicators of emerging trends so that we can focus on resources to address now. Finally, the review team will focus on the Air Traffic Organization, ATO. The review team will assess the ATO's internal processes, systems, and operational integration. I will ask the team to explore actions needed to reinforce a collaborative, data-driven safety culture. The review will also look for opportunities to strengthen the connection between ATO and the FAA Aviation Safety Organization for monitoring and addressing of safety risks. We all know our aviation system is changing dramatically. That's a reference to the huge turnover in the aviation industry. Now is the time to act. In aviation, much like in the military, we're always fighting the last battle. And with the FAA and the government, it takes years to resolve these battles. I've most recently attended the FAA required PLM training, or leadership and command training for pilots in command, as was required by this advisory circular dated back to 2020. This training was mandated by a series of accidents that occurred as far back as 2004. The purpose of this training is to provide pilots in command with the leadership and command skills necessary to manage the crew, flight attendants, if applicable, communications, and workload in a manner that promotes professionalism and adherence to standard operating procedures. Overall, it was a bit of a review of recent events in the industry and a good reminder of distractions in the cockpit and what it takes to be professional aviators and stick with the standard operating procedures and don't allow distractions into the cockpit and remain professional at all times. Many pilots took exception to this training, citing the excellent safety record that we currently have. But recent events have shown with the huge turnover in the industry that this safety record may be jeopardized. So how did we get here? Why are we now having this sudden, huge turnover in the industry and loss of experience in the industry? First off, the cost of admission to getting into aviation. For years, it's been said that it's not so much a pilot shortage as it is a pilot pay program. The introductory jobs to getting into aviation for many, many years was so low that people could not afford the expensive cost of training only to get very low-paying jobs in aviation in order to pay their dues before they had enough experience to get on with the major carriers and start making a reasonable living. The cost of admission was just too high. Second, this accident right here in 2009, the Colgan disaster, Buffalo Niagara International Airport. It was Congress's knee-jerk reaction. You know, I was for it before I was against it, or maybe against it before I was for it. But the knee-jerk reaction to this accident required that they raise the minimum number of hours to 1,500 hours before somebody could apply for a job as an ATP at the airlines, air transport pilot. Before this accident, a person can get on with the airlines with as little as about 250 hours and then get that training through the airlines to get the requirements to meet an ATP rating. In other words, in the past, you could get on as a commercial pilot with the commercial pilot limitations or minimum requirements and then work your way up to the ATP, air transport pilot rating, and then continue on with an airline career. Now we've got pilots having to fly around the sky in dangerous jobs or meaningless jobs or buy a little Cessna 150 and just rack up 1,500 hours before they can even begin to apply for an airline job. In my opinion, it would be much better now to remove this requirement for the 1,500 hours and in place of that 1,500 hour requirement, have an ab initio training program, which most airlines already have set up right now. Bring those pilots in at a very low time or even off of the streets and train those pilots in a safe training environment within the airlines and get them the time and the hours and the requirement that they need within a safe environment, doing the job that they are going to be trained to do for the rest of their career. But so far, due primarily to public pressure, the FAA has rejected this idea. Again, keeping the bar of admission so high that few qualified people are willing to spend the money and time and effort to do what it takes to get these jobs. And what has accelerated this huge turnover in the industry is our reaction to the pandemic. The huge bailouts that the government gave the airlines incentivized the airlines to retire many of its most experienced pilots. Also, too, the concept of keeping other pilots current and qualified didn't quite work. When the demand for air travel snapped back, the airlines had a tough time getting the pilots up to speed, current and qualified, and able to respond to the public demand for air travel. Meanwhile, during the pandemic, the government completely shut down and the FAA was unable to conduct any of the training that it needed to conduct, and for a long time was even doing check rides via GoPro cameras as they were unwilling to come out of the cubicles to get the necessary training done. And that's part of the whole backlog of what we are suffering from today is a training backlog, not only at the FAA, but at training facilities all around the world. Regarding the focus here on the air traffic organization, air traffic controllers are government employees. Unlike pilots, we have a license that is issued to us by the government, and that license could be revoked at the drop of a hat. The government employees that run ATC, it is very hard to fire a government employee if they are found at fault in their jobs, unlike us pilots. Both at ATC and at the airlines, are we hiring the best people for the job, or are there other ulterior motives to hiring other than getting the best person for the job? And similar to Southwest Airlines, the FAA, we've recently found that the information technology behind the NOTAM system is woefully inadequate at the FAA. Are we getting distracted with other programs of political correctness, like renaming the NOTAM system to Notice to Air Missions instead of Notice to Airmen, instead of focusing on the important thing of updating the information technology of the NOTAM system? Or did changing the name of the NOTAM system somehow throw off the old DOS computers of getting the NOTAM system to work correctly? What are our priorities here? So now we have this huge turnover in the industry, and it's affecting the industry at the biggest, most senior aircraft out there, like the Boeing 777, the aircraft that I fly. Each of these flying jobs is a union gig, and that the pay and the benefits that you get from this job is tied to not only your seniority, the date that you got hired, but it's also tied to the size of the aircraft. The most desirable jobs are flying these wide-body aircraft. So you see the most senior people flying wide-body aircraft. Remember, I have to have a type certificate ride. I can only be current and qualified on one airplane at a time at the airlines. So I have to go through training each time I change airplanes. So I work my way up the ladder to get on the Boeing 777, and that's where the retirements are coming off of, is the big aircraft. You want to be left seat on the wide body aircraft to maximize your career pay. So what that means is there's a large turnover of pilots in the wide body, the most experienced fleet of aircraft as well. And a lot of these pilots are coming from different types of aircraft like Airbus, where the technology is considerably different. The engineering philosophy behind the aircraft is quite a bit different. And as much as the airlines want to try to streamline training to minimize costs, these transitions can mean a lack of experience in the most senior aircraft. Even if the crew is, as United Airlines claims here in their latest incident, have 25,000 hours, how many hours do they actually have in that aircraft that they're currently flying? They may have recently transitioned to that aircraft. So I hope that gives you a better idea of how we got here and some of the issues that Billy Nolan is going to have to deal with as the head of the FAA in his FAA Safety Call to Action this March. Thanks so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.